BTW, FYI. Visit Nexplanon.com RN to learn about Nexplanon. It's an gestural implant, 68 milligrams radiopaque. Or ask your HCP IRL. Okay, TTYL.
CRM was supposed to improve customer relationships. Instead, it's shorthand for can't resolve much. Which means you may have sunk a fortune into software that just bounces customer issues around but never actually solves them. On the ServiceNow AI platform, CRM stands for something better. With AI built into one platform, customers aren't mired in endless loops of automated indifference. They get what they need, when they need it. Bad CRM was then. This is ServiceNow.
This episode of Backlisted is supported by serious readers.
Which is fitting because that's what we are.
I find my eyes get tired in the evenings, and it's easier to read during daylight.
And a serious reader's HD Essential Light gives you the full spectrum of daylight. Suddenly, every word is sharp, the contrast is better, and the strain just goes.
Which means I can read longer and moan less.
And that's good for everyone.
Backlisted listeners get £150 off the HD Essential, plus free UK delivery with the code BACK at seriousreaders.com/back.
And you've got 30 days to try it at home, risk-free. That's seriousreaders.com/back and use the code BACK.
And now, on with the show.
Skeleton Dance, played by the Edison Concert Band.
Hello and welcome to Backlisted, a podcast which raises the spirits of old books and obliges them to take on new life. The story we're recounting on this year's Halloween episode is Wuthering Heights by Emily Brontë, first published in 1847 by Thomas Newby in the UK and the following year by Harper and Brothers in the US. I'm Andy Miller, author of The Year of Reading Dangerously and Inventory, an unreliable guide to my record collection.
And I'm Dr. Una McCormack, science fiction writer and Associate Fellow of Homerton College, Cambridge.
Backlisted has been running for 10 years. In our time, that's right, I said in our time, everyone. We've built up an incredible community of listeners, patrons and guests, plus a library of 250 shows containing everything from the weird tales of M.R. James and Daphne du Maurier to the discomforting novels of Shirley Jackson and Elizabeth Jane Howard to the sacred monsters of Henry James and Beowulf. And those are just the Halloween specials, of which this, episode 251, is the latest and may perhaps prove to be the most disturbing yet. We shall see.
One easy way to avoid the Halloween curse is to support the podcast and to listen to episodes from our backlist by following Backlisted on whatever podcast app you use. Really helps bring the show to the attention of new listeners.
In other words, please subscribe to Backlisted.
Indeed, subscribe to Backlisted. Now, joining us on today's show to discuss Wuthering Heights by Emily Brontë, a work of weird fiction by perhaps the weirdest of the Weird Sisters, as the women were nicknamed by the residents of their hometown, are Backlisted's own family of blood, Laura Varnam and Andrew Male. Hello.
Hello.
Hello, or should I say what?
Welcome back, Andrew and Laura.
It's horrible to be back, Andy.
It's terrible.
It's awful to have you. Andrew and Laura, our very own Burke and Hare, back again to dig up a few bones for us to anatomise.
We're laying it on thick tonight, I think.
Well, it's Halloween.
It's
You
Halloween.
can't on Halloween. When can you, right?
Indeed. Andrew Male has been writing about music, film, books and TV for the last 30 years, for which his reward is to interview Van Morrison tomorrow morning. That's incredible.
Well, here's hoping. I mean, he's bailed on me before, but I'm sure that it's going to happen tomorrow morning.
We'll conjure him up.
And I promise not to get my Van Morrison questions and my Heathcliff conversation points mixed up.
It'd be interesting to see how much overlap there is, I think.
Well, exactly.
What do you imagine Andrew Heathcliff would be like as an interviewee?
Very, very like Van Morrison. Not willing to talk about his back catalogue. Focus on the future. You know.
That's a fan fiction. Yeah.
There's an image to conjure with. Weren't expecting him to appear opposite Merle Oberon or someone, were you? Anyway, it'd be good. Right, sorry, Una, on you go.
Having appeared on Radio 4's Boring Talks and many excellent podcasts, including Backlisted, justifiably earning the sobriquet by which he's known around the world, Mr. Halloween.
Hi, Mr. Halloween.
Hi,
Welcome
Mr. Halloween.
back.
Welcome back
Oh,
indeed.
Please, I have moved on from that.
Well, welcome back, Andrew, and thank you so much for coming. And we're also joined by Laura Varnam. Laura Varnam is the lecturer in Old and Middle English Literature at University College, Oxford. As an academic, she has published books on the medieval church and the mystic Marjorie Kemp. And she is an expert on the life and works of Daphne du Maurier, who she habitually refers to as the fourth Brontë sister.
I do. There'll be a lot of that.
Laura is also a poet and is working on a collection inspired by the women of Beowulf. Her memoir of appearing regularly with Andrew on Halloween episodes of Backlisted, entitled I Walked with a Zombie, will be published next year.
Full of spooky tales and real behind-the-scenes stories.
Exactly. Laura, you found a particularly unusual Backlisted adjacent thing yesterday, and you have now managed to bring Neighbours into the Backlisted orbit.
I have indeed. I was watching Neighbours yesterday, and I was absolutely thrilled to discover the character of Elle Robinson, who is the daughter of Paul Robinson, played by the wonderful Stephen Dennis, the arch villain of Neighbours. Paul's daughter Elle was reading a book, and that book was, Backlisted fans, Birding by Rose Ruane, former Backlisted guest. Wonderful, wonderful novel, such a favourite of all of us. I nearly fell off the sofa, I screamed, I took screenshots, I put them all over the internet, and Rose was delighted because she is also a fan of Neighbours. So this was just the most incredible intersection of all my interests. Backlisted and Neighbours just came together.
How do you think Elle, the character, rather than the actress or the producers, is it in keeping with her character that she would read the excellent novel Birding by Rose Ruane?
I think it is, because Elle is a journalist. So I suspect that Elle reads excellent newspapers as well as writing for them. And I'm sure she's a podcast listener. So I suspect she listened to Backlisted and decided to read the novel as a result of that.
Oh my!
That is my headcanon as to how this happened.
Oh my!
You exist in the Neighbours universe, Andy.
I do. I do.
Well, if I can effect that transition completely, I'll finally be a happy man.
Yeah.
If I cross from this realm to that one, to Ramsay Street, that would be good. Thanks.
Now, you may not think of Wuthering Heights as a Halloween tale. It's one of the greatest novels in the literary canon, of course, and much studied and analysed as such. But over the next hour or so, we hope to illuminate the ways in which the book can be read as a tale of mystery, imagination, and horror. If you haven't read Wuthering Heights, but think you know it from film and TV adaptations, you may be surprised. In the words of the Reader's Guide to Wuthering Heights at wuthering-heights.co.uk, many people, generally those who have never read the book, consider Wuthering Heights to be a straightforward, if intense, love story, Romeo and Juliet on the Yorkshire moors. But this is a mistake. Really, the story is one of revenge. It follows the life of Heathcliff, a mysterious gypsy-like person from childhood, about 7 years old, to his death in his late 30s. Heathcliff rises in his adopted family and then is reduced to the status of a servant, running away when Catherine, the young woman he loves, decides to marry another. He returns later, rich and educated, and sets about gaining his revenge on the two families that he believed ruined his life.
You want it darker? Well, the life of Emily Brontë and that of her family is one of the bleakest and most tragic in the history of English letters. From the start, the myth that has attached itself to the literary sisters of Haworth has tended either to obscure or simplify the facts of the matter. That this was in some ways encouraged by Charlotte Brontë herself, her father Patrick, and her first biographer Elizabeth Gaskell is all part of a story that contains romance, art, and nature, yes, but also failure, poverty, squalor, scandal, religious fervour, fatal passions, adultery, violence, infant mortality, madness, alcohol and drug addiction, disease, and premature death. Please exit through the gift shop.
When we come back, we will shoulder our knapsacks and set off across the moors towards a remote, windswept pile lit only by a guttering candle. Who are the spectral figures on the horizon beckoning us on? What do they want, and why? Why does one of them resemble Cliff Richard?
Right, okay, Una.
Right.
Over to you, please.
Downhill from here. Right.
Yeah.
So we should begin by asking Andrew, can you hazard a guess at when you first became aware of Wuthering Heights or the Brontes?
Oh, first became aware of it would be watching the Laurence Olivier and Merle Oberon 1939 film when I was a kid. And I think maybe a couple of years after that, I read the book, or to be more accurately, I read the first half of the book, as I think a lot of people have, and then kind of abandoned it. I was startled to discover that where the film ended, the book still had about 2/3 to go. So the first time I read the book all the way through was last week. This is basically my first encounter with the complete tale of Wuthering Heights.
Wow.
And so if I have any readings of it or interpretation of it, they are all as a 58-year-old man and not as a kind of, romantic teenager caught up in the supposed romance of Cathy and Heathcliff.
Well, and furthermore, of course, you are here, we are very happy to say, as our resident student of the macabre and so forth. We will come on to discussing placing it in that context in a moment. I just wonder briefly, I would just like a snapshot of how it felt to be reading that particular book at this point in your life.
I found it, reading it felt like being trapped. I mean, this kind of contributes it to the sense of it as a work of uncanny fiction. The book itself feels haunted. Reading it feels like you're trapped inside a curse or a dark fairy tale, or and this is a positive, I stress, a world of constant screaming nightmare. I mean, like, even the supposed good people within the book, like Lockwood or Nellie Dean, are not good. I mean, one of Lockwood's first actions is his decision to pull Cathy's wrist, the ghost of Cathy, the form of Cathy, onto a broken window pane and pull it against the glass until she starts bleeding. You know, Nellie Dean withholds two of the most crucial pieces of information within the book, you know, that probably contribute to certainly somebody's death and kind of and possibly the whole undoing of the narrative. I mean, I was kind of startled by how truly dark it was, given that I'd only read the first bit, and I'd only kind of known it through popular culture. Heathcliff is almost like a sort of high functioning zombie a lot of the time, sort of driven by hate and revenge.
So you found it relatable, is what you're saying at this point in your life. I see. Okay,
I found it startling. I found it, I think one of the most amazing things about it is that the idea of what Wuthering Heights is and how Wuthering Heights exists within our popular culture, and the actual experience, and I stress the word experience, of reading the book, because it is an almost physical experience to sort of go through reading it. I mean, maybe people who kind of came to it at a younger age or an earlier time don't feel that way, but I was kind of shocked by how sort of visceral and unpleasant it felt at times.
I'm going to ignore the anxiety of drifting into self-parody, because I've done that many years ago, and I'm going to mention All the Devils Are Here again, which we made a joke of last time. I've just mentioned it. You can't stop me. And I mentioned All the Devils Are Here because I described that recently as being an ungovernable text. And actually, that applies to Wuthering Heights. Wuthering Heights will not fit in any shape you want it to, even the one we're proposing to do on this show. And that's why it's so incredible. We should go straight to Laura and repeat the original question as ever. Can you pinpoint or even vaguely remember when you might have first become aware of Wuthering Heights or the Brontes?
So I think it was when I was about 14. And I read Jane Eyre first, and I think it really shifts your or kind of cements your feelings about these novels, which one you read first. Like I think it matters which one you read first. And I read Jane Eyre first at the same time as I was reading Du Maurier. Those of you playing bingo, have a drink
right,
now. It's my second Du Maurier of the night.
And won't be the last. That's why you're always welcome.
And I'd read Rebecca, and I think I'd already read Du Maurier's first novel, The Loving Spirit, the title of which comes from an Emily Brontë poem, and that novel of 4 generations is structured around Emily Brontë quotations. So I'd come across her, and then I read Wuthering Heights, and I thought it was weird, just so bloody weird, and now. I was right about it being weird, because it's weird in the Old English sense. Weird coming from the Old English word meaning fated, meaning prophetic, meaning something, as Andrew was saying, you can't escape from it. You are trapped inside it, and you're pushed through it, you're pulled through it. And there's this moment at the beginning where Lockwood talks about how he's gone up to Wuthering Heights, basically because he'd been about to sort of take part in some kind of Jane Austen novel where there was a woman he was interested in, and as soon as she looked at him, he decided, he couldn't do anything here. And there's this description where he says as soon as this woman he was interested in looked at him, he confesses with shame that he shrunk icily into himself like a snail, at every glance retired colder and farther. And that's how the novel made me feel. It made me go, I want to hide from this. I can't cope with this. It's too much. It's too brutal. It's too violent. It's too savage, and I don't know what to do with it. So I'm just going to push it away and think a bit more about Jane Eyre, because that feels safer. But what a book. What an amazing book it is.
Una, one of the pleasures of studying this again for this show was thinking of Jane Eyre as in some way like an easy listening cover version of Wuthering Heights. But anyway, we'll come on to that. Una, come on, you and I have both, I know we've both got like origin stories for this. When do you think you first became Brontë aware?
Oh, well, very basic. 1978, Kate Bush. Yeah.
Absolutely.
6 years old.
Same.
You see that happening in front of you. That's going to impose itself on your consciousness.
If you knew that song and you heard that song, given that it is literally a version of part of the plot of Wuthering Heights, you at that point, you know about the book, at least at some level. When did you expand that into the full Brontë universe?
So I'm fairly sure my adolescent reading was a bit spotty, but I'm fairly sure I read Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre as an adolescent. But my real Brontë encounter was about 11 years ago when I was on maternity leave, and I read the whole Brontë oeuvre, kind of from The Professor through to Villette. There I was, sort of, it's 2 a.m, I'm not going anywhere. Let's do something that by the end of this 9 months, I feel I will have achieved something. I don't know if I was just extremely tired, but I began to read Wuthering Heights as an episode of Rising Damp. And that got me through some quite low moments.
I'm going to apologise to many younger listeners, if we have any, in advance. I promise you many of the references in this show will seem quite arcane. Rising Damp, a popular sitcom of the 1970s starring Leonard Rossiter. Okay, so did you go on to write an article for a learned journal or take a break, either of those, called Brontë novels ... ranked double exclamation mark?
No, they were all hashtagged Brontathon on Twitter. Villette goes top, but it was a close run with Wuthering Heights, actually.
All
And
right.
in my heart, I know that Wuthering Heights is the best Brontë novel.
Speaking of arcane things, I'm like Una. I'm fairly sure my first experience of Wuthering Heights, or the first impactful one, would have been the #1 single by Kate Bush, which she wrote when she was about 15 or 16. She recorded when she was 17, and it was #1 when she was 18. All of which is kind of mind-boggling, really, isn't it? But she wasn't much younger, in fact, than Emily Brontë when she wrote the book in the first place. We'll come on and talk about the Kate Bush song in the second half of this show. But I think my first exposure to the Brontë myth was a program, called a TV program in 1979 called The Brontes of Haworth, which was a Blue Peter special assignment. And here, thanks to a man in New Zealand and a very hissy old VCR recording, is an excerpt from that program.
All the Brontes could paint and draw. This is Charlotte's drawing of Flossie, Anne's little spaniel. And this is Emily's of her dog Keeper. Branwell also painted this portrait of Emily. She loved Haworth and the moors even more passionately than the others, and the few times she went away, she became really physically ill. As she grew older, she cut herself off more and more from other people, and roamed the moors with her great dog Keeper, who cared for no one in the world but her. She was still faithful to her lifelong dreams of the land of Gondal, and poured out her soul in verse, which she put into the mouths of the characters in that unending chronicle.
A messenger of hope comes every night to me, and offers for short life eternal liberty. He comes with western winds, with evening's wandering airs, with that clear dusk of heaven that brings the thickest stars. Winds take a pensive tone, and stars a tender fire, and visions rise and change, which kill me with desire.
One day, in the autumn of 1845, I accidentally lighted on a manuscript volume of verse in my sister Emily's handwriting. I looked it over, and something more than surprise seized me. A deep conviction that these were not common effusions. To my ear, they had a peculiar music, wild, melancholy, and elevating. My sister Emily was not a person of demonstrative character. It took hours to reconcile her to the discovery I had made, and days to persuade her that such poems merited publication.
Well, there you have it. That was an excerpt from the Brontes of Haworth, produced for BBC TV in 1979 by Blue Peter. That little clip does sum up all sorts of things that we think about the Brontë myth, about these wild, natural girls and their miraculous appearance on the literary scene. And that is a topic we will come back to. But I think, first of all, I would like to turn to Andrew and say, reading this with your pumpkin head on, what elements of the weird, the supernatural and the horrific did you identify in Wuthering Heights?
Well, I think if you'd let that clip run on a little bit longer, you'd have heard Peter Purvis say that, and I agree with him, that Wuthering Heights, I think, is one of the texts of folk horror, body horror, and torture porn.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah.
79.
I've met Peter Purvis, and he just bangs on about this kind of thing all the time.
I mean, one of the things I thought was interesting about it, reading it, is you can hear Milton's devil in Heathcliff, and also Shakespeare's Iago as well. These characters who only exist to destroy. There's the Satan in Milton says, "Only in destroying do I find ease." And I think kind of you can see those as the kind of roots of certainly of Heathcliff. But I think it was really striking noticing all the ways in which kind of you could spot the books that it went on to influence. I think the most obvious one is Dracula. Because obviously, you've got Dracula's arrival in a port town. You've got Bram Stoker's use of disassociated narrators. You've also, Dracula is this mysterious, destructive, dark-skinned foreigner who speaks in a curious gibberish. Also, how does Dracula gain entry to the bedrooms of his victims? Let me in at your window. Tap, tap, tap. And this theme that's repeatedly runs through Wuthering Heights about eternal love after death is obviously the theme that runs through Dracula. So I think that's an obvious one. But I think you can see Heathcliff in Spike from Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Michael Myers in Halloween. Just the idea of just this relentless figure dead set on one goal and one aim. Even something like Twilight, which asks the question, what would it mean if the person who you loved wanted to kill you and destroy
But
you?
also there, you're evoking to me A Warning to the Curious, for instance, by M.R. James, the indefatigable
absolutely.
pursuer.
Yeah. And someone who you can, because the thing about Wuthering Heights, yes, you can say it's revenge, but there's something else that exists beyond that, isn't it? That is kind of infernal and uncanny.
Yeah. Laura, you wanted to come in there.
There's something of Peter Pan there as well, the coming in through the window, and J.M. Barrie's depiction of Peter Pan as this kind of wild demonic boy whose other half is in some ways Captain Hook, and that's a huge influence on Du Maurier. And what you have, what happens when you have this figure who comes through windows, who wants to take children away. There's something about the way that the childhood scenes between Cathy and Heathcliff are constantly repeated, but also become sort of demonic and possess other characters and constantly repeat and come back.
This idea of these grown-ups who behave like children, which is one of the things that runs through Wuthering Heights, the sense that or a young person, i.e. Emily Bronte's idea of writing about grown-ups and playing about grown-ups. And I do not mean this as a slight at all, but one of the main books that it reminded me of was The Young Visitors by Daisy Ashford. The sense that you have got kind of these characters in it who are grown-ups, but the way they behave does not correspond to how grown-ups behave in the real world. They are a creation of this writer, and they are a fantasy that does not seem to be fully drawn from the world in which they inhabit.
Una, that brings me perfectly to ask you of Wuthering Heights as an example of what we would now call genre fiction. We know, don't we, that Wuthering Heights, in a sense, the world of Wuthering Heights is an extension of Emily Bronte's writing up until that point, which is fantasy, is unapologetic world building, specifically with her sister Anne, of the realms of Gondal and so forth. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Gondal was a sort of game that they played together, wasn't it? They came up with these stories. I think wasn't Glasstown the original one. Branwell and Charlotte had their own play world, which I think is Angria. But Gondal seems to live on for Emily, insofar as we know much about them. It seems to live on for much, much longer than these imaginative games usually do. It's not just childhood play. It seems to be a source of deep imaginative productivity. And it's analogous to, in certain ways, to what Tolkien is doing with kind of inventing Middle Earth, that it goes beyond those sort of childhood drawing of maps or playing games with your sibling into something that becomes richer and deeper. And as I understand it, Laura will know more about this, a lot of Emily's poetry we read as poetry, but actually behind it, there's a lot of Gondal myths. So some of the most famous poems actually are sort of attributable to characters in the Gondal stories.
Yes, the the kingdoms that they came up with as children were absolutely fundamental to their artistic creation. They were collaborative. So as Una said, Emily and Anne working on Gondal, Charlotte and Branwell working on Glasstown and then Angria, and then they started to sort of almost splinter off and have these quite competitive stories from these different kingdoms. And these stories were also, I think this is really important, they were literary. They produced little books, they wrote magazines, they reviewed each other's work, often in quite sort of cheeky ways. They vied with each other in this competition. And just to plug du Maurier again and her biography of Branwell Brontë that's called The Infernal World of Branwell Brontë, Charlotte called those kingdoms the Infernal World, and Charlotte became afraid of them, and she feared that they had become so powerful that she was losing touch with reality. That is what du Maurier thinks is the cause of Branwell's downfall. He's unable to distinguish truth from reality, fiction from fantasy anymore, because he's completely engulfed by this infernal world. But for Emily, du Maurier says, she says, Emily alone revelled in its glory and lived with it forever. She was able to channel it and she wasn't taken over by it. But it very much comes out of this collaboration of which Branwell is at the centre. He's given this box of toy soldiers and they each take one and they create these characters. So all of the literature comes out of this incredibly rich but deeply, deeply dangerous imaginative world.
Laura is wearing a Team Branwell badge that she bought at the Haworth Parsonage gift shop. I have one here myself. This is at the point at which this show gets really weird, where we turn it into an episode about Branwell's lost novel. That would be a backlisted triumph, but we're not going to do that. So Andrew, look, going back to this idea of Wuthering Heights as a suitable Halloween read. We'll talk about the ghosts just in a second. In what authors do you think the natural/unnatural world, the way Emily Brontë writes about that in Wuthering Heights, what genre authors does that remind you of? I had a touch of Arthur Machen in terms of what can emerge from the hills and the valleys and whatever. And the bog is a really interesting thing in the graveyard that is next to Haworth Parsonage. As John Sutherland points out, if you bury someone in the loam or the soil round there, it has a quality of preserving the corpse rather than eating it away. So, for instance, in the novel, when Heathcliff wishes to disinter, after however many years it is, Cathy's corpse, the chances are she is actually fully recognisable and rather well preserved, which is in itself a horrific prospect, horrible. Right?
You mentioned M.R. James and also Arthur Machen, but I'd also like to mention one of, I think, our first Halloween author from 10 years ago, Robert Aikman. Robert Aikman's first story, The Trains, and his last story, The Stains, the rhyme is intentional, are both versions of Wuthering Heights. And the Trains is set within a house that two female hitchhikers come upon that has a relationship within it that is very similar to the relationship that is encountered in Wuthering Heights. And his last story, The Stains, is about a lonely middle-class civil servant who becomes infatuated with this mysterious, wild, nymph-like woman who lives on the moors. And he mistakes her world for one of liberation, which is going back to what we were saying about the myth of the Brontes. But what she actually does is she turns his world into one of mold and entropy and rot. So it's that idea of the moors and nature and landscape that infest. So his house becomes infested with mold, and they grow they start to grow mold on their skins, and they basically become literally consumed by the nature that he romantically tried to be at one with.
Yeah.
So you can see that Aikman is reading Wuthering Heights and seeing the horror within it.
Right. Yes, that's really, really interesting.
What you were saying, Andy, actually about the, digging in and finding the corpse there sort of preserved. It's like a twisted version of Sleeping Beauty, isn't it? I think,
Okay.
is behind that. But the other thing that I started thinking about when I was rereading was how a book like The Secret Garden is almost preparatory reading in a way. I think obviously you've got the Yorkshire setting, you've got Mary's deeply unpleasant nature, you've got the
Yes.
sickly child.
There's nothing wrong with your back, Colin.
Yeah.
That's the-
Just get up and move
Yeah.
around. Yeah, and then you've got
nice girl.
Dickon, who is kind of a sort of, an 8-year-old friendly version of Heathcliff, I guess. The creature who's close to nature and at home on the moors, this kind of thing. It's like you'd read that and then you'd find your way into Wuthering Heights.
Okay, so that's interesting about, in a sense, Wuthering Heights' influence on genre. But Laura, one of the tenets of the Brontë myth is that, as propagated by her sister Charlotte, is that Emily emerged almost like a golem herself out of the clay around Haworth and was channeling nature in various ways. And in fact, that's not really true, is it? I mean, they weren't wonderfully educated, but they read and read and read. So what would Emily have been reading that feeds into how she then builds the world of Wuthering Heights?
Yeah, she's really well read. She's reading Byron, she's reading Wordsworth, she's reading Sir Walter Scott, she's reading James Hogg, reading the classics. Their father, when educating Branwell, also brought the girls into this discussion. They had free reign of the library. They were reading Blackwood's magazine. They were very, the Gondel and Angria stories are very political. All of this is feeding into the sophistication of the structure of the novel. I just wanted to quote a couple of things that Charlotte says in the 1850 preface to Wuthering Heights that she partly writes. So the novel was published in 1847. It has some really quite in some ways vitriolic reviews talking about its savage qualities, it's violent, it's all about brutal, unchecked passions. And Charlotte writes these prefaces when it's republished, and she describes Wuthering Heights as moorish and wild and knotty as the root of heath, nor was it natural that it should be otherwise, the author being herself a native and nursling of the moors. She goes on to say that Emily has scarcely more practical knowledge of the peasantry amongst whom she lived than a nun has of the country people who pass by her convent gates. But sort of worse than this kind of thing, she talks about her extremes of vigour and simplicity. She says an interpreter ought always to have stood between her and the world. But the bit that I find just makes me so mad. She says of the characters in Wuthering Heights, having formed these beings, she did not know what she had done.
Oh, that is a low blow, right?
That's
Yeah.
a classic how to suppress women's writing.
It really
isn't it?
is.
She wrote it, but she didn't know what she was doing. Yeah.
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 Yes.
Well,
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Charlotte is terrified
But
by
that's
the power
Jane
and
Eyre is an
control of her
attempt to
sisters.
control Wuthering Heights,
writing.
isn't it? It's kind of she's so terrified by it that
Absolutely.
she kind of attempts to kind of rework it and transform it into something else.
okay, look, this seems like a good moment to bring in. We're talking about the Brontë myth. We're talking about Charlotte. This seems like a good moment to ask each of you which member of the Brontes, of the Brontë family, their circle, which is your favourite. You may only choose one. I'm going to start with Laura. I'm hoping she's going to be true to her code. Who is your favourite Brontë?
Team Branwell. Team Branwell all the way.
Team Branwell. It's
Yeah.
the dissolute brother, the tragic individual whose own failures can be said to have caused the conditions under which the sisters lived and produced fiction.
Absolutely. You can see him within Heathcliff. You can see him within Rochester within so many of the characters. But also as the key member of those early literary collaborations.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's one vote for Bramwell. That's excellent. Andrew, who is your favourite Brontë?
Emily, she's the OG. I think also her poetry, I think, is what her adult poetry is what awakens the darker adult side of the sisters. You know, Charlotte finding Emily's poetry is kind of takes them to another level in their writing. So I think it's Emily for me.
Una?
So my favourite Bronte is Patrick. I have a soft spot for Patrick.
That's their father. Everybody.
Their father, yeah, who sort of is from a. We have this myth of the Brontes as being, living in this rough, windswept environment, but genuinely he was from a background of poverty. Pulls himself up, goes into the church, gets to Cambridge. Marries, father's 6 children, and then one by one, he watches his wife and his 6 children die. And I just find that an extremely moving and poignant story. And whatever we know about him, from the kind of milieu that he creates or by neglect allows to happen, all this incredible work emerges. So I have this soft spot for Patrick.
Our former guest and dear friend Samantha Ellis would at this point, and if she's listening to this, is probably shouting out loud, "Anne, where's Anne?" So I'm sorry about that, Sam. But my favourite Bronte, I'm afraid, is Charlotte, and there's a very straightforward reason for that. You know, I have been deeply affected by the negative publicity that Paul McCartney has received over the years. And I see Charlotte as very much the Paul McCartney of the group here. She just wants everyone to get along. They've got some hits coming. Keep the hits coming. Don't mess with the formula. You know, take care of the PR. Ambitious. She's ambitious like Paul McCartney, right? Is that fair? Is Charlotte the Paul McCartney of the band?
I think you're absolutely right. So, I mean, that means Emily is John, the sort of,
I'm looking at my... Do we agree? Hands up if we agree.
Absolutely
Emily is John.
agree.
Which makes Anne George.
The quiet one.
Yeah. And I think Bramwell is a cross between Pete Best and Stuart Sutcliffe. So you've got that kind of the rebel element, but you've also got this person who isn't handsome enough and isn't trustworthy enough to get them a record deal. So they ditch him and then sort of go to see, and bring in someone else.
I put it to you that the most working class member of the Bronte band, who grew up in poverty but provides a steady beat, is Haworth itself.
That's good, because I was going to say Patrick is Ringo, as you know.
You see,
there's too bright. Ringo. He's too bright.
I think there's no Ringo in the Brontes, and that's why the Beatles are better than the Brontes.
Okay, well, look, when we come back from the break, we're going to have a conversation about ghosts in Wuthering Heights, and their significance, and to what extent they are the leading emblem of Wuthering Heights as a weird novel. But when we come back from this break, you will hear a few minutes of one of the most significant adaptations of Wuthering Heights from a TV series made for the BBC in the 1960s.
I see nothing, so... You lost your tongue, sir. What ails you?
She was there.
Who?
Lost it. She held my wrist like a demon. Well, when I tried to close that casement, her wrist was caught and blood.
Confound you, sir. I've been awakened for a nightmare.
Oh, no, it was real. She cried to be let in. Oh, God. Oh, I'd rather face the snowdrifts than spend an hour in this house, Mr. Heathcliff. She was there. She said her name was Catherine Linton.
Lie.
On my honour, sir.
Said her name was...
Linton! Catherine Linton! Oh, God, if she'd gone through that window, I'd be a dead man. Mr. Heathcliff, I'll not stay in this house.
No, you may take my room.
No,
No, go, you're outcast, and speak to the devil for me. You say you can and will not stay here. Go. Hear me this time. Where are you? Kathy?
So there you go. That was a clip from the final episode of the 1967 BBC TV adaptation of Wuthering Heights. You heard a young and swarthy Ian McShane as Heathcliff there. That seems to me to be a really excellent rendering of the darkness and the ghosts of Wuthering Heights. Laura, the ghosts in Wuthering Heights, do you think they are real ghosts? They are figments of somebody's imagination? But more importantly, what does it do to the novel if they are real ghosts? And on the other hand, what does it do to the novel if they aren't?
Such a good question. I think, for me, I think they have to be real ghosts. I think they really do. I think if they're not, there's something almost irredeemable about the novel. If all of this power has had no impact on the surroundings, on the place, if these characters have not been able to somehow embed themselves into the landscape and the houses such that they can come back, then it terrifies me to think about what this has all been for somehow, which seems like a weird way round to say it, because there's also an argument to say, well, they're all figments of Lockwood's imagination. He has those three dreams before the two other dreams before the Cathy dream. There's the dream where all of her names multiply before him. Clearly Heathcliff talks later about being haunted by her image. He sees her image everywhere. So they could be figments of people's imaginations. We're clearly in a novel in which, you know, it's the ultimate unreliable narrator, or kind of nested boxes of unreliable narrators, but somehow I need them to be real. I need that somehow.
Yeah.
For me, the power sort of lies in the ambiguity, and who believes in, who proceeds through the world as if it were true within the confines of the book. But what I found really interesting on this reread was the way that the characters in the books talked about the reality of ghosts and goblins. And they talked about them in equivalent terms as belief in God or the devil. And I just think that's incredibly interesting, you know, particularly from the daughter of a pastor, that there's God, there's the devil, there's the ghosts, there's all the other stuff, you know, and that belief in that is as valid and as meaningful a belief as in a kind of Christian pantheon. And I think that's strong from a pastor's daughter.
That is the philosophy of her poems.
Mm.
That this is all equivalent, and that God can reside within the self, and that nature is as powerful as church, and belief in rigid religious ideas is sometimes the practice of fools. Big shout out to Patricia Routledge, who helped me with the book, with the audio book, because hearing this book read aloud, you realize that Emily Brontë is a poet, and you hear the rhythm of the language and the rhythm of the dialogue. And if we look at it in one way as a work of poetry, and you look at kind of what symbols are in poetry, they're allowed to exist both as the thing and as the symbol. So I think the ghosts both are and aren't. They exist in both states. Like the novel itself does not reside in a fixed state. and I think that the ghosts are the same.
Can I also add that a ghost story is traditionally told by a roaring fire, by somebody speaking it to you? And in fact, this book has two narrators, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But in both cases, it's kind of like a first-hand account of I can't prove it, I can't tell you, I can't.
Yeah.
But it's like get ready to be chilled, because this is a long-winded way of saying yes, absolutely. Of course they're real, and of course they aren't.
And to be possessed in turn, this story is now our responsibility. You know, ghost stories are in the telling, but also in we have to take it forward and repeat it.
And Wuthering Heights is an act of possession.
Absolutely.
You know, it possesses you.
Completely.
And that's why I say it is in itself a haunted text.
Completely.
And I think that's one reason why adaptations of it are in many ways so particular to the adaptee, that you can go from the melodrama of the Olivier to something like the Andrea Arnold adaptation, which is, it's grim up north, but then has a marvelous moment of haunting just at the end, really, real tingling moments of the haunting at the end.
Adaptations, people are very exercised, and we don't have to dig into why, but people are very exercised about the forthcoming film called Wuthering Heights, which may or may not be an adaptation, but certainly is drawing inspiration from Emily Bronte's novel, by the film director Emerald Fennell. Andrew, why are people antsy already? This film isn't out for ages.
Una pretty much defined it, that because the novel is so vast, because it's not fixed, Emily does not provide any human individuality or psychology. So there's so much space for the reader to place themselves in it and take stuff away. And so each of us will have come away with a different version of Wuthering Heights. And I think therefore that becomes, you can become very possessive of that. So I would combine that with what you were saying about the myth of Wuthering Heights and the myth of the Brontes, and how the adaptation seems to hold hard to a romantic notion and a romantic ideal. So we have these very strict ideas of what Wuthering Heights should be, even though Wuthering Heights itself resists that when you read it.
So much like Elizabeth Taylor, as we said the last time you were with us, there is a real sense people feel proprietorial. You said that Wuthering Heights possesses people. Well, I think this is further evidence of it. People don't mess with what I think Wuthering Heights ought to be. Right? Hey, Laura, what do you think Wuthering Heights ought to be? And has Emerald Fennell delivered?
I am a massive fan of adaptation. I'm writing an adaptation of Beowulf myself. I'm all for it. The more rogue, the better. Go wild. And yet, the Emerald Fennell trailer, I think it's an abomination. I
don't. If you're listening, Emerald, I tried to hold them back, but they wouldn't do it. Go on, it's an abomination. Go on.
Even the most fan fiction friendly among us draws a line.
I'll tell you for why, and I would be really interested to hear what you all think about this. But it's being billed as this erotic psychological drama. I don't think Wuthering Heights is sexy. I don't think it's about sexual passion. If the moment where Kathy says that Heathcliff is more myself than I am, whatever our souls are made of, his and mine are the same. And as I was kind of having this thought, I reread Daphne du Maurier's essay, Romantic Love, where she says of Wuthering Heights, there is more savagery, more brutality in the pages of Wuthering Heights than any novel of the 19th century, more beauty, more poetry too, and what is more unusual, a complete lack of sexual emotion. I don't think Wuthering Heights is a sexy book.
It's one of the. I was listening to the In Our Time on Wuthering Heights, and one of the funniest things about it, and obviously In Our Time is always very funny, but one of the funniest things about it is Melvin's preoccupation with whether their relationship was consummated. He asks it about 3 times and goes back to it. He goes, "But do you think that the relationship was consummated on the moors?" And it's just constant, and you're absolutely right. It's like kind of that it seems to exist outside of that. It's a violent novel. It's an obsessive novel. It's kind of, it's, flesh, yes, flesh and blood, but not sex.
Okay, so look, we're talking about adaptations. The adaptation clip, if you have a chance to see that, what's interesting about it, the one we played from 1967 after the break, is Wuthering Heights is fascinating for all sorts of reasons, the Kate Bush record. One reason is, as has been noted, it's one of the only adaptations that takes Cathy's perspective. And that proves to be a recurring theme in Kate Bush's songs. When she adapts something, she will often, like on Cloud Busting or on The Red Shoes, she will take the perspective of the female narrator and tell you a story you think you know, but from the woman's perspective. But also it's worth noting that when she wrote the song Wuthering Heights, she hadn't read the book. What she'd seen as a 9-year-old child on the BBC was that bit we just played you earlier. And if you watch it on YouTube, you will see that the actress who plays Cathy, lit from beneath, looking at the camera, direct into the camera, is reproduced by the 18-year-old Kate Bush in the video for Wuthering Heights. She'd remembered it with so clearly, and it had made such an impression on her that nearly 10 years later, she actually channels it into the video.
It's a possession.
A possession, exactly, but a video that no one could see. It's only when this thing came out of the archive about 10 years ago that people were able to make that connection.
I'd be really interested in the amount of people who love Wuthering Heights and their main knowledge of Wuthering Heights is, as you say, Kate Bush's adaptation and no other.
Yeah. Laura, could we talk a little bit about the structure of Wuthering Heights? When the novel was first published, I think I'm right in saying that it was scandalous, wasn't it? And people were outraged by it, to the extent that they couldn't see the craft within it. And it wasn't until the 1920s that someone published a paper pointing out that you could actually, it's scrupulously well structured and dated.
Absolutely. It's that sort of nested box structure where you've got Lockwood and you've got Nellie Dean, and moments where Lockwood, he sort of becomes Nellie Dean, and she is such an interesting figure, as we've already said. But Charlotte in the 1850 preface holds up Nellie Dean as something completely different. She says, "For a specimen of true benevolence and homely fidelity, look at the character of Nellie Dean." You think, what has she even? Has she read this?
She read this book.
Did we read the same Wuthering Heights?
She's got the lost manuscript that she's been reading, because that's not the version that I've got. It's an incredibly sophisticated structure that I think then, and also in terms of the way that it plays with time, the way that the ghost of Cathy is the childhood Cathy. There's the moments later when Cathy is ill and she feels haunted almost by her former self and her future self. She's doing incredibly complicated things, looking backwards and forwards in time across the structure of this novel. It's deeply, deeply sophisticated.
And I think if anyone hasn't done this, and I know I did this when I was a teenager, just sit down and do a little family tree and see how elegant all the names that shift and move around, which is part of its structure and its concept and its framework. But just sit and do a family tree and see how careful that is, and how that is it's like the skeleton of the book, I think.
Andrew, the repetition of names is something you commented on. What's going on with that?
Well, the thing is that on the one hand, it's beautifully done, but also it's surely done purposely to confuse. So you get this sense of loops and repetition and kind of, and the way in which these things are related to, trauma, and trauma being revisited upon a family. So, and re-emerging in different versions of the same name. So on the one hand, because I know earlier on, Laura, you casted me for saying that the novel is chaotic. It is emotionally chaotic at the same time as being beautifully structured, and that's the marvel. It's like listening to some sort of piece of jazz where the rhythm section is totally together, but what's going on over the top
Yes.
is
Okay.
just this kind of blasting noise.
It's Ornette Coleman, isn't it? His most
Yeah.
plastic saxed. Could I ask you then, Laura, one interpretation, and the great thing about Wuthering Heights, it is of course ungovernable, endlessly interpretable, but one interpretation there for Wuthering Heights and the ending of Wuthering Heights. Yes, we're about to talk about the ending specifically, so if you don't want to know what happens, look away now. You could almost interpret that as Heathcliff, finally the penny drops, that the only way to break a cycle of abuse that he has suffered from and perpetuated is to take himself out of it, is to will himself to death.
Or he's just exhausted.
Yeah, but also
that's
he's got Kathy saying, come on, come across, come across, come across.
Yeah.
Which is just what Kathy herself has done. There's this wonderful moment where I think Nellie Dean describes her as full of ambition, which led her to adopt a double character without necessarily wanting to deceive anyone. Kathy's been split in two between Wuthering Heights and Thrushcross Grange, and neither of those are places where a woman can thrive or have any kind of real identity. And that fracture happens. And then she has to will herself out into some kind of other afterlife because there's no real place for her to go. The only person who gets out is Isabella after she marries Heathcliff. She leaves, and I think she's a really interesting character.
We haven't really talked about Nellie Dean, who is not only an unreliable narrator, but talk about your unlikable characters. I mean,
classic backlisted.
She's not a nice person.
Absolutely.
Yeah, rereading it this time. There's a moment where Heathcliff seems to break, and it was one of the moments I found most spine-tingling actually, where he walks into the house and young Catherine is teaching Hurton to read, and they've got their heads together, kind of fair and dark, and he comes in and they look up at him, and Nellie describes it. It's two pairs of eyes looking at him, but they're both older Catherine's eyes, so it's like a double Catherine stares back at him, and he seems to snap there. He seems to go, I can't beat this. I can't. I've tried to break her. I've tried to warp him, but people are ungovernable, and that seems to tip him. And it's a really chilling moment, actually.
If you can't beat them, literally, join them.
Enjoying them.
Enjoying them. Okay, listen. We've talked a lot here about the ghost story of Wuthering Heights, but I wonder if we could finish with just talking a little bit about the ghost story of the Brontes. What is it about the Bronte myth that, even though we know on one level that they were well educated and that Haworth was not an obscure little village, it was an industrial town of some 5,000 souls, and they weren't particularly clostrated and so on and so forth. What is it about the story of the Brontes? What is it about that story that we need? What does it give us in the culture that we always tell it and tell it again?
Because it's about art coming out of landscape, which seems to be a sort of a British ideal. You know, the idea that our landscape, the England itself, Britain itself, will be, a creator. Will give forth art. There's something miraculous about it that I think people hold on to.
Is it also, Una, that people just want to believe that someone can just be brilliant?
Yeah.
Rather than work at brilliance.
They're touched by some kind of muse, or some inspiration strikes, or a vision is given, or something is channeled through them. Whereas, as I think we've discussed, they worked and worked and worked at this unconsciously at first as children, but they told stories, they wrote books. I'd forgotten, they'd review each other. Yeah, they're working at this. And then Charlotte later is very consciously working at this as a professional as someone who wants to become a professional. But the idea that something, I guess it's like John Clare, isn't it? Again, that's landscape. We want to feel that something bubbles up, something is ungovernable, I guess.
I would suggest as well, Laura, that we, the public, love miraculous brilliance that doesn't require work, and then we love to know that they'll be punished for it. That is the story of Van Gogh, or the story, as long as they suffered and died young, we can handle it. If, on the other hand, they have long careers, we just we get bored of it.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, and they can be controlled. On the one hand, there's this myth of the artistic family, and we love that, and we see that in the Du Mauriers too. But the other side of this is, unfortunately, the patriarchy, controlling incredibly imaginative, industrious, hardworking, disciplined women with their dissolute brother. What they did is just extraordinary. And yes, they had this touch of magic and a visionary quality about them. There's something of William Blake to Emily Brontë. But
everyone thought he was mad too.
Yeah. But they worked their socks off, and they read, and they learned their literary craft. Again, like Du Maurier, who similarly gets dismissed.
I think Daphne du Maurier has been mentioned more in this show than
The
the
actual
one we
show.
made about
Yay!
Daphne du Maurier.
In the context of that, the failure of Branwell's failure is integral. The fact that he is the man amongst three sisters, and the fact that he is the failure, and also the fact that he is probably the one who believes in the idea of the miraculous most, that this stuff will just emerge, and especially it will just emerge if you take laudanum or you get drunk. The idea of the male creative artist, all you need to do is go to the pub, get wasted, and you'll write something miraculous. And it doesn't happen. That's his tragedy, but it's also integral to the myth of the Brontes.
Also, the other piece of bad luck that Branwell and all the Brontes had, but Branwell in particular, is he was always popping down to the Black Bull to drink himself stupid with beer that was made from water soaked through 40,000 corpses in the graveyard, because they hadn't deteriorated in the ground. They'd just leaked into the whole substrata of Haworth. And the pub made its beer from the water that had gone through all the bodies in the graveyard. So
he truly was haunted.
Yeah, there you go.
By all those souls.
And if that's not a Halloween story, I don't know what is. And that's where we must leave it. Thanks to Andrew and Una for digging into a bitter feud that seems to have lasted for generations, and to Laura for coming on and talking about Wuthering Heights. And many thanks to our producer today, Tess Davidson, for being our own loyal Tabby Ackroyd. For show notes with clips, links and suggestions for further reading for this show and the previous 250 episodes, visit our website at backlisted.fm. If you wish to buy the book discussed on this or on any of our other shows, visit our shop at bookshop.org and choose Backlisted as your bookshop.
And do subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/backlisted. And remember, if you subscribe at the lot listener level, you'll get 2 extra exclusive podcasts every month, installments of Andy's new project, Inventory, and the chance to join a community of dedicated listeners and readers like ourselves.
But before we go, Andrew, and honestly, beacons are being lit around the coast of the UK as I prepare to ask you this, or they could be effigies, I'm not sure. But anyway, Andrew, if Wuthering Heights by Emily Brontë were a Gene Kelly film musical, which would it be?
I think it's the one in which a group of opinionated people come together and rework classic ideas over and over again. And there's a central scene in which one of the characters, a man, goes mad during inclement weather. I think it has to be Singing in the Rain.
Lost.
Hooray!
I've waited 10 years for Singing in the Rain. Well done. Pull your shirt over your head and run around the room, Andrew. Well done.
Well, Lorna, is there anything you could add to that? Is there anything you'd like to say about Wuthering Heights that we didn't get to in the show?
I barely know how to follow that. It's extraordinary. A little plug for the Isabella Linton inset letter and story, because I think that's a really important bit that people could keep their eyes peeled for. And I also want to just plug an amazing graphic novel called Glasstown by Isabel Greenberg, which, if you want to get into the Gondel and Angria story and the importance of that to the Brontes, obviously read Daphne du Maurier's The Infernal World of Branwell Bronte, but also check this out, Glasstown by Isabel Greenberg.
Brilliant. Okay.
And I should definitely plug my Doctor Who audio, where the Doctor has an adventure with Emily Bronte, surely.
What, I can't believe you haven't mentioned that already. What's it called, Una?
It's called The Window on the Moor, and it plays with the Glasstown stories. So it's just a little audio.
Incredible.
Amazing. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a fantastic Halloween. Have a lovely time. Thank you, Cathy Earnshaw, Heathcliff, and the Moors themselves, along with Una, Laura, Andrew, and Tess, for joining us for this special Halloween episode about Wuthering Heights. Thank you, everyone. See you next time. Don't have nightmares.
Bye-bye.